Hello students, my name is Anita Raj and I am one of the co-founders of eCoreAcademy along with my younger brother AJ Raj. Today I will be interviewing a new individual, Ms. Shivani Chokshi, the co-founder and CEO of Impactionable, an organization that connects people with talent to opportunities in the social impact space. Impactionable looks to engage in community-oriented work that goes beyond charity or donations, which are commendable ways to get involved but not the most sustainable. Impactionable instead acts as the bridge between passionate people without access to the resources to give back, with avenues to still make a positive impact on the world. From offering a job portal to hosting social innovation competitions and video sessions for fostering leadership and mentorship, Impactionable does it all with Shivani at its head. Let me give you some background on Shivani, but before I do, please make sure to like, comment, hit the post notification bell, subscribe, and share. Shivani was kind enough to provide some background information about herself, her purpose, and her profession. She has experience working with the government, international development organizations, and corporations dedicated to solving challenges in education and international development policy. Her experience includes managing multi-million-dollar budgets and grants within public education, conducting human-centered design workshops, and utilizing data visualization to explain system processes for organizations like Chicago Public Schools, USAID, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Shivani holds a master's in public policy from George Washington University as well. She now leads Impactionable, a social enterprise that helps people connect to jobs and funding opportunities in the social impact space. Hello, Shivani. Welcome to eCoreAcademy. I'm so happy to be speaking with you today. So how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. We're really grateful that you were willing to do this interview because your advice and what you say during this interview can be really insightful for many students who watch the video. So I want to jump right into the first question I had, and it's about your educational experience. So you attended Marquette University for your bachelor's degree in peace studies in Arabic and biological sciences, and then you attended George Washington University, Columbian College of Arts and Sciences for a master's in public policy analysis. So based off of what I just said, I just want to know, what was your college experience like, and what were some of your most notable memories from that time?
I love this question because my path was untraditional. Combining peace studies and then Arabic and then biological sciences is just, it feels and it looks really random on surface level. So I can provide some context on that. So when I initially went to Marquette, my thought was to have a major in biological sciences. I wanted to be a doctor, especially when, you're an Indian American and you're raised in an immigrant household. You're told that the three successful careers that are out there are and being an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer. So I wanted to be a doctor. For the first 3 years until my junior year, I was studying biological sciences. It was actually my major then. And for some reason, it just wasn't clicking. It wasn't clicking in the way that it was clicking for everyone else who seemed to be in my class. And then I was just waiting to, see what my actual purpose was. Something I had to work twice as hard to get, a relatively decent grade, and it didn't feel right. And then my family and we go to my grandfather's farm, or not farm, his school that he built in Degam, India, 50 years ago. So we go there we go to India every 2 to 3 years. And this wasn't my first time at that school. It was maybe my second or third time. But this time, when I was at that school and I learned stories about how he funded the school, how he worked with the government to, get the necessary funding and the laws that needed to be in place to build the school, and how, he worked with his friends to build it from the ground up. I realized that there was something that was a bit different here. I understood a little bit about the impact that he was able to make in a community that typically didn't, have the privilege to go to school, especially in a city school in that area, that it was mostly a subsistent farming base. So what ended up happening was, for a week I stayed there, and just, saw how 800 students and 4 teachers it was 400 students and 8 teachers that ultimately now were able to get jobs, and were also able to get an education as a result of advocacy, grassroots advocacy work. And something in me shifted, that I wanted to do something that was a bit more community oriented than what I was doing. So I went back to Marquette. I went and I had enough credits to make my major a minor in biological sciences. And Arabic was something that I always wanted to just learn more about. And then Peace Studies came about because of, the advocacy work. The Center for Peacemaking was really big in my influence during my undergraduate years, and they were always, hosting protests and civil rights movements, and they were always advocating for peace, especially at the Mexico-Arizona border, where they were protesting the border wall down there. So that work really spoke to me, and I went into peace studies that way. But that was a long-winded way of saying that I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then, the journey kind of unfolded beautifully afterwards. And even though, I had enough credits to graduate a semester early, and it was a beautiful experience at Marquette, and then later on to George Washington.
I think that was so inspirational, especially how you talked about where the source of your passion came from. And a lot of high school students are still trying to figure out, like, what is their passion, what really speaks to them, like you said. And again, you talked about how you use that passion to get into the professional space you're in right now, which is like social impact work, because you're a social entrepreneur. I think that's really fascinating, especially how you mentioned, straying from the path that typical Indian Americans might go down to do something that you truly love and something that you felt was like meant for you. So thank you so much for that. So my second question is a little bit more about like your interests. And I know you mentioned working with like local government. For example, you even mentioned how it goes all the way back to your grandpa working to establish laws to help the school that he also established. And in addition, you said you are interested in solving challenges in international policies. And in your resume, you were a government affairs intern in Chicago. So I want this question that I'm going to ask to be pretty open-ended. So please feel free to share any experiences that come to mind. What was it like working on and managing large teams and projects, but like specifically in this interest area of yours?
Yeah, so during my government affairs internship, I wasn't managing teams, but I was more it was more oriented towards creating reports on voter education resources and the upcoming primary elections in Chicago. And it was really advocating for civil rights, especially, for Muslim Americans that have faced discrimination in different shapes and forms in the Chicagoland area. I also, I came back to CARE Chicago after a few years to be a civil rights intern, and to really learn and digest the legal research and like the case laws that CARE Chicago also helps. It's like Muslim American population that has faced discrimination. So the government parts, I learned less about government in the CARE Chicago program than I did, working at, Chicago public schools, because we're literally in the government at CPS and working in the international development sector at a nonprofit that advised governments like governmental institutions like USAID and the Australian government on their particular, monitoring and evaluation tools. But when it comes to the managerial parts, especially with Chicago Public Schools, I work as a local school council specialist. So that means that, there are schools within Chicago that have their own councils that make critical decisions for their schools. They hire principals, they evaluate principals, they pass budgets, they approve certain programming within the schools. So they have a lot of decision-making authority for their individual schools. And our job is to answer to their policies. Essentially, we are consultants and we ensure that, their proper protocol it follows Illinois school code. So in that way, you manage your schools as best you can. It's a little bit less hands-on, but it's just you're there as a consultant for your schools. But it's interesting to see government in different shapes and capacities. I think, when you think of your typical government worker, you think of someone working in a municipal building and clocking in and out at a certain time and the job being relatively routine. But there's so many different aspects of government that you can really utilize to your advantage. And there's a lot of perks of working in a government. So you can see how policies are run at an individual level all the way to an institutional level and how the mindset evolves with that. So the mindset comes with that. But I have to say it's just an interesting experience.
Yeah. I think your perspective on like working with governments is super interesting, especially because you have so much exposure and experience in that area. I think mentioning how you were like involved with like the public schools and how you were kind of like a consultant, like I feel like did you feel like you were kind of maintaining the quality of education in the schools and kind of helping out in that regard as well?
So I don't have a teaching background. I can't really speak to the curriculum or the programming that schools have. I think that I am doing and did as much as I could for the overall like wellness of the individual student, right? So I used to work in the budget department before local school councils, and the budget department was a little bit more administrative in how we give grants to schools, and schools that are higher needs, we give them more money and whatnot. But with local school councils, it's a little bit more grassroots, and it's more, you go into these individual school meetings and you may be in charge of like guiding them through the process to select their next principal, and that principal has direct impact on the school and the community. And there's a lot of politics involved. So you have to learn how to navigate that, right? So you do the best that you can to keep your personal opinions aside and really just speak to what's in the legislation and what's in the code. And I trust me, this is an incredibly political job, and to be able to just speak to what's in the code and not letting your personal opinions guide your decisions is extremely difficult. But it's just interesting, like being able to navigate that space.
The reason I asked that is because I know some people like want to get involved in like what you're doing. They don't necessarily want to be teachers and be involved in education directly. So what you did is like a really interesting alternative like path that they can take to still be involved in like the same local like school community, working in a more like legal and an administrative way to still guarantee like students have the best experience in school. So that's really, really interesting. And what you said about not letting your opinions interfere with like the facts is really, really important too. And that's something I do see myself in school. And it's just a skill that I think obviously like you probably mastered or are mastering. And other high school students, anywhere in like the professional world, that's like an important skill to pick up too. But yeah, that was a really important thing that you mentioned. But going back to your job, I wanted to see if like could you like list some of the upsides and downsides as to like what you do, like what do you like, what do you not like so much, just so people can get like a full perspective of like your opinion.
Absolutely. So in Chicago, there are 511 schools that have local school councils, and they're divided into networks. I'm in charge of 2 to 3 networks, and these networks are basically schools that are located in a specific geographic area. So I have, I believe, around 45, 50 schools in my network. Yeah. So, so what happens is, these councils, every 2 years, there's new members that are coming in. We host local school council elections. So people can vote in who they want. There are members that are community members, parent representatives, student representatives, teacher representatives, non-teacher representatives, and even principals. So principals are automatically a part of the local school council. So like I said, these councils make really critical decisions about hiring principals, evaluating principals, passing parts of budgets, approving certain programming and fundraising activities for the schools. So they make really critical decisions for the school. And I love Chicago in the fact that it's the most democratic public school system I think I've seen in the nation, where it is so grassroots and you can see the direct impact of your work, where you can sit on a committee and you can say, this is the right person for our school. I will vote for this person. And if 6 other people vote with me for this person, we have now just selected the principal of our school for the next 4 years. And that decision lies with us, so it's amazing to see such direct impact of your work presented in that way. The flip side of that is there are people on the council that, when power is given to them, people can choose to use that power to their own advantage or or instead of the school's own advantage. There are, we see people like this in our day-to-day lives, right? People that come in with their own political agenda of what they want to see being passed for their schools or their communities or for parks or wherever it is. So navigating those political relationships with people is really tricky because you have to watch what you say. And you can only speak to what's in the code. So you better know what's in the code because you better believe that they have checked everything that's in the code and they will correct you on it if they find, something wrong in what you're saying or how you're advising them. So it's just, the code is like thousands of pages long. So we've truncated it into a reference guide, but there are people that may use the council to their own advantage. So it's just important to, like, as you move throughout when you go and you, the longer that you're in the role, it's like each case is different, but it's just, I think that's a downside in working in any sort of political environment.
Yeah. No, thank you for your honesty, because it's really important that students who might want to go down like the same path or similar path as you get like a balanced perspective on what they're going to encounter. And like you said, the upsides are seeing your direct impact on like the community, specifically in your case, like the Chicago public schools. But then the flip sides are also things you need to consider, like political relationships with colleagues, especially if you're like in the occupation that you're in. So I think that was super important. Thank you for that insight.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Every day is different, that's for sure.
Yeah. But I wanted to move into Impactionable because I know that's a really important part of like your purpose and achieving your goal of like engagement in the community, you know, like you said, a direct impact on your community. And obviously, as since you were a co-founder, you were like one of the reasons the whole organization came about. So could you talk a little bit about the story of how Impactionable was born? Like, how did it come about?
Absolutely. So Impactionable came about in 2017. My co-founder and I, we were both summer interns at a nonprofit called Ashoka, Innovators for the Public. And it's a nonprofit that believes everyone can be a change maker. And a change maker is a social entrepreneur who gets funded by Ashoka to build their own businesses that can make a positive difference in the community that they're situated in. So my co-founder and I, we didn't know each other. We happened to be at a brown bag at the same time, and she describes it as love at first sight because she had an idea, and she was looking for someone to execute on the idea. So she just asked for my number, and she asked if we could meet for lunch at the Panera downstairs. So that's exactly what we did. And she explained an idea about creating a platform where social entrepreneurs can just communicate on ideas that they have, you know, in the environmental space, education space, technology space. Those are the three sectors that we were really working towards. It took me 2 weeks to really understand the idea that she was trying to share with me. And then once I signed on, things happen really, really fast. Yeah. She's a really good innovator and she comes up with brilliant ideas, and I'm really good at operations and executing. So we made a really good team. So what happened was, you know, we got the website up and running on October 8th, 2018. That was a really big milestone for us. That's when we officially launched the business. And the more and more people that we ended up talking to, the more people, you know, were interested in speaking about ideas and sharing resources with each other. But, you know, our whole thing was about the fact that anyone can be an entrepreneur or anyone can be a change maker, much like Ashoka. We wanted to get everyone involved. But the more people we talked to, the more I learned that people didn't describe themselves as being innovative or as being an entrepreneur. So we were like, we're losing out on so many people that could make a difference. They just weren't business people, and that's fine. You know, we just want to reach as many people as possible. So we started hosting video sessions to get, you know, events up and running so everyone could join and learn from other entrepreneurs or join and learn from existing business leaders that were also social impact related. Mm-hmm. Then as we grew, there were more people that, you know, wanted to get access to the talent in our community, because what we built over the last few years were people who were all interested in social impact work, and they were extremely talented people. And that community, getting access to that community, grew valuable over time. So now people were posting jobs to us. People wanted us to source talent for them for their own events and stuff. So we're like, maybe our business model has completely changed. Maybe we should be in the business, like a consulting business, where we can host, events. We can also have people post jobs to our community so people can find jobs if they are not entrepreneurs themselves. And we can also host social innovation competitions. So if there is someone that is an entrepreneur and wants to get funding, they can apply to the competition, and through sponsorships, we can give them funding for their ideas. So this was about equity, not equality. This was about meeting people where they were. So if you didn't want to be an entrepreneur, you didn't have to. You could just join networking events, or you can look at the existing jobs which were in our community. And then now we're growing to a point where people are not only seeing the value and the talent that we have in our community, but, getting to a point where we're slowly becoming known as like the consulting firm for sourcing talent itself, period. So it's an exciting time. We're still, there's so many things that we want to do with that, but we created the business and nixed and changed the idea like 150 times. And we've just been like hearing what the people think and what they need. And especially during COVID, when everyone was looking for jobs, like it really, I think like took off during that time too. So, but yeah, that was our story.
No, that's amazing. And for what it's worth, I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. Just going on your website and seeing like the sheer amount of opportunities like you offer it's really amazing, because people are looking for that. And I know I read on your website, like in your mission statement, that your goal is to connect talented people with opportunities. And that's really important for an organization like yours. And I think you're achieving what you wanted to, and I think it's really amazing. And I think something else you mentioned that's really important is how Impactionable has evolved, and you kind of evolved with it. Like you said, it turned into something where you're consulting and sourcing people with talents into like jobs that need them in the community, and your impacts during COVID. So all that is super, super important. So thank you for sharing that. But I do want to go back to something you mentioned earlier in like your description of Impactful, and that was Ashoka. So I know you mentioned being like a summer intern, and I read that you specifically like co-led a business model pitch, which I assume was on Impactionable. You created a competitive analysis, a SWOT analysis, crowdsourcing, etc. And I was wondering, like, because this was done in like 2017, which is 5 years ago. Do these skills like end up helping you throughout like your journey in developing Impactionable, and how so?
Definitely. So the analyses that we did do, we couldn't present it to Ashoka, in case there was a conflict of interest or whatnot. And we were also in the ideas phase, so there wasn't an actual business that was formulated at that time. But I'm not a business person, neither is my co-founder. My background's in nonprofit and public education, and my co-founder's background is in talent acquisition and management. So we were not business people, and working on those projects like SWOT analyses and customer segmentation, they really did help in just understanding a little bit more about the community and the business that we were going to step into. And especially in the beginning, where when you are in the idea stage, you should learn as much about your customer segments to see, if we really had a problem that was worth solving. If we should invest all of this time and money into creating a business that could solve that challenge. And honestly, that took years, that idea stage, it took years. So I would say the Ashoka internship, it did provide a more realistic foundation on what to expect when creating a business, and then other things came along after, but it definitely did.
That's really interesting to hear. So I want to move right into my next question, just a little bit more about you. On your LinkedIn profile and your biography, you mentioned a quote that I assume is really important to you because you included it, and that is, "Start small, but start somewhere." Mm-hmm. So I was wondering, could you explain what this means to you and why it holds like significance in your life?
Yes. So that essentially is the motto for Impactionable. It speaks to the individual. It speaks to the fact that, at least for me in my own life, I thought I had a plan for my life and that everything was going to work out according to plan. And I realized that the more that I plan, the less I can, number one, the less actually goes according to plan. And second is, if I plan, then I appreciate less of what life has to hold for me in that moment. So that motto, especially, when it came to my personal life, it's just sometimes people are scared to start, especially in Indian cultures where success is so public and success is what's prioritized over failure. In order to succeed, you need to fail. And the importance is that don't be scared of starting. And even if you are scared, start anyways, because if we didn't start Impactionable, hopefully Impactionable is successful like 20, 30 years from now. But even on the off chance that it isn't, it'll bring me, my co-founder, it'll bring our team to that next step, So it's just sometimes like the hardest part is starting. But if you start, even if you think is seemingly small, it will, you never know how it'll pan out in the future, so that's the most important thing. Don't be scared of failing. It'll all work out in one shape or form.
Yeah. I think you beautifully explained why it's so important to obviously start somewhere so that hopefully you'll get somewhere in the future or you'll reap a benefit of the journey you took to along the way. So it's really important to the students here who, kind of skeptical about taking their passion and kind of starting something. So I think that's really important. And something else that I wanted to go over was in the Impactionable mission statement. Something that really stood out to me was how the goal is to develop like sustainable ways to give back to the community. Mm-hmm. And a lot of kids my age are looking for ways to do that. And sometimes they don't have the resources that can guide them to find a sustainable way. For example, like eCoreAcademy was kind of like my way of giving back to the community, but it took so many years for me to like figure out what the passion was and like how to like actually execute it. So I was wondering if you could give, with all your experience, you could give some insight into like how can kids like my age, high school age kids give back to their communities in a sustainable way.
I love this question, Anita. I think it just speaks to who you are as a person and what you are doing at eCore, because I think you can also answer this question. I fully think, actually, I'll answer first and then you should answer after, because I know you know the answer to this question. So, for me, I have a unique perspective in that I truly believe in the power of businesses as a way of businesses that can uplift entire communities. And maybe not everyone agrees with me, but working in government, it's great, and you can see change at a systemic level. But for me, especially working with Impactionable, we've been able to create jobs as a result of our work. We've been able to connect people who weren't previously aware of the social impact space. Now they have careers in the social impact space, and not only careers that are like volunteering or careers that are underpaid, but there is money to be made in social impact. And once we're able to close that monetary loop and really just share the fact that, social impact shouldn't be an afterthought. Actually, millennials and Gen Zs, I believe it's over 68%, 68% of millennials and Gen Zs are now looking at companies and their social impact when deciding where to work. There was over $10 billion were invested in the last few years in businesses that are looking to, in venture firms that are looking to invest in social enterprises, because they not only see as investing in businesses a way to improve their own branding, but also these businesses are they're helping the planet, they're helping communities at the same time. So in most ways, multiple people win, multiple communities win, and even the planet wins as a result. So I think if we tie in the realistic ways that we can make a difference, and also ways where people don't have to, after working a 9 to 5 shift, they can, if they have energy left, then they'll go volunteer at their nearest shelter. Like, if that's one way that you want to give back, that's fantastic. But there are alternative, sustainable ways that instead of giving back after your 9 to 5 shift, you can give back during your 9 to 5 shift. So I think, it's kind of beautiful working in business and also working in public education at the same time, because this is a relatively new sector. Social entrepreneurship wasn't coined until the 1970s or 80s. So it's a relatively new sector that people are just starting to turn their heads towards. And there is a level of education that is involved in just sharing the word, spreading the word about what social impact and working in the social impact space can really do. So to me, merging the two, public education and Impactionable, and like helping create and connect people to jobs, is that's like a sustainable way, a really sustainable way to make positive change in the system. But that's my take. What's your take, Anita?
First of all, I just wanted to say, when you talked about like a 9 to 5 job, but finding a way that you can like make a social impact during that time, I think that was really important. That really stuck out to me. And I agree with absolutely everything you said. In my opinion, for kids around my age, it's really hard to, like I said, connect your passion to like an action statement. And a lot of times kids like have these passions and want to see this change, but may not have the resources to. My motto is always like, create the change that like you want to see. And luckily I was blessed with the resources to be able to do that. Even though it took a lot of time and a lot of my effort, but really, I think that's where platforms like Impaction will come into play, because I have gotten connected with a lot of students who wanted to help out with eCoreAcademy, and I wouldn't have been able to unless it was like for platforms like Impactionable. And now that they're on board, they can like work side by side with me and other people who are also passionate like in this area. So I think that building networks and communities, like really strong, tight-knit communities, are really important, because if you build a community, you can just create more networks, reach out to more people with the talent, but maybe not able to find the opportunity to give back in an area they're interested in. So I feel like a sustainable way is, if you have the resources to, then take the initiative and start the change, and then start reaching out to people who might not have the same resources as you, but who are equally as passionate as you and have so many more talents that will like complement yours and will bring more to the table, and just create like networks and connect with people who can like help you foster the change you want to see. Now that was cheesy, but yeah.
Snaps all the way, my friend. I have to say, like, y'all give me so much hope for the future, because it's like the millennials have done some work, but Gen Zs are going to change it up. Like, oh my Lord, I'm so excited. And like these, so I told you that I deal with like parents and people who have their own political agendas at CPS, at these councils. It's the students that they like talk down to, saying that students are young and inexperienced, and they might not know what the code says and all of that. But oh my God, I have students, especially in high schools, that are reading the code, they're quoting the code back to the parents, and they're holding them accountable so much during the council meetings. My team and I, we always rave about the students, because it's the students that are the ones that are the advocates for the school itself, and it's the most beautiful thing to see, because I'm like, yes, this is why I have hope in the next generation, because y'all not only are equipped, but you're equipped, and you know your stuff, and you aren't afraid to share your stuff with people who may not agree, you know? So it's like whenever that happens, I turn my camera off, I put myself on mute, and I'm like, let's go, tell them, you know? So that's, you know, what you were saying is just, it spoke to that. It spoke to like the amazing stuff that you're doing too. I'm really excited for you and all the other students.
Yeah, thank you. But I have to say, like, not specifically millennials, but people like you build the foundation to be able to do things like that. So we need people like you to, you know, build the foundation so that we can keep going. Yeah.
We need each other.
We need each other. We need each other. But yeah, well, those were all my questions, but thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you. This has been amazing, and it makes me want to run up a mountain right now. I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Here we come to the end of the interview. Thank you for joining me and learning more about Ms. Shivani Chokshi, the co-founder and CEO of Impactionable, but also an inspirational leader and social entrepreneur, transforming the social impact space and giving people more opportunities to play important roles in making their communities better places in a sustainable way. Please make sure to like, subscribe, comment, hit the post notification bell, and share using our socials to see more content like this.